Hi, and welcome to The Greatest Lies in History, a riveting podcast that dives deep into the world of con artists who manipulated historical narratives to their advantage. I'm your host, Kimberly Desmond.
And I am your co-host, Patrick Pichler. We are two history students from Vienna with a love for all things that deal with historical scandals and controversy. Each episode of this podcast unpacks the intricate schemes, the psychology behind deception, and the consequences of these fabrications on our understanding of history. It explores how lies can shape societies, influence politics, and even alter the course of history itself.
Today, we're going back to the eve of the French Revolution to dissect one of the most iconic but probably misattributed quotes in Western history: "Let them eat cake."
That's totally right, Kim. This phrase is forever tied to Marie Antoinette, France's last queen before the revolution overthrew the Bourbon monarchy. She is often depicted as the personification of aristocratic indifference and excess. But did she really say those words? And was she truly the heartless figure so many have painted her to be? We'll dig deep into the context, politically, socially, and personally, that shaped Marie Antoinette's reputation. We'll explore the misogyny of the age, the xenophobia against her Austrian roots, the notorious fear of the diamond necklace, and the ways in which revolutionary propaganda molded public opinion.
Indeed, we're diving straight in, so strap in for a thorough journey through the late 18th century and find out how bread shortages pushed France to the brink, how the Jacobins dealt with women's rights, and how the press used rumors and sensational pamphlets to inflame hatred. So let's get started.
To really appreciate the power of the elite quote, "Let them eat cake," we have to understand what France was going through right before the revolution started. By the 1780s, France was suffering from severe economic and political strife. The royal treasury had been drained by expensive wars like the 7 Years' War and the American War of Independence. At the same time, King Louis XVI, though personally well-meaning, was not exactly a decisive, reform-minded monarch.
Correct, and that's an understatement. The taxation system in France privileged the nobility and the clergy while leaving the commoners, over 90% of the population, carrying the burden. For instance, while peasants and the emerging middle class had to pay taxes on virtually everything, the clergy and nobility often paid little to nothing. Attempts at reform were blocked by the upper estates. So when you add crop failures in the late 1780s, especially the disastrous harvest of 1788, and skyrocketing bread prices, you get a deeply resentful third estate. Bread is fundamental. If the price doubles or triples, people starve.
Yes, indeed. And starving people become desperate. Historian Maria Waldinger's research, for instance, shows a direct correlation between regions hit by hardest because of famine and local participation in early revolts. So, if the rumors were true that the queen literally shrugged and said, "If they have no bread, let them eat cake," it wouldn't just be an insult, it would be a flaming torch tossed into a powder keg.
Exactly. Over time, she became so close tied to that controversial line that it all but defined her public image, an image shaped by the era's severe economic woes and stark class divides, which provided fertile ground for such a rumor to flourish. So let's address the elephant in the room. Did Marie Antoinette truly say, "Let them eat cake"? The earliest known version of that phrase comes from Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Confessions, published around 1765. In which he attributes the line to an unnamed great princess. He doesn't mention Marie Antoinette by name, and in 1765 she was only about 10 years old and not even in France yet.
Right. The phrase existed beforehand, serving as a proverbial example of an out-of-touch aristocrat. Over time, as discontent grew, it was easy to attach these scandalous words to a woman who was already a lightning rod for public outrage. That's because people were eager to find a scapegoat among the elites, and no one fit the bill better than the foreign-born, extravagantly dressed, and much gossiped about queen.
And that scapegoating was fueled by more than just politics. Let's look at her background and see how xenophobia and misogyny came into play.
Marie Antoinette was born in 1755 as an Archduchess of Austria, part of the formidable Habsburg dynasty. For decades, indeed centuries, Austria and France had been on opposing sides of various conflicts, but in 1770, a political strategy aimed at mending Franco-Austrian relations led to an arranged marriage between the Austrian Archduchess Marie Antoinette and the French Dauphin, the future king Louis XVI.
This marriage was supposed to be a diplomatic masterstroke, forging a new alliance. When the teenage Marie Antoinette arrived in France, the official press was effusive. She was celebrated as this divine figure, almost an embodiment of peace between two longtime rivals. There were fireworks, salutes, grand ceremonies. The monarchy wanted to put out a show of unity.
But that diplomatic win didn't translate seamlessly to the hearts and minds of the French people. Tensions lingered, and rumors about Austrian duplicity kept swirling. The French had older grudges, suspicion of Austrian meddling, and discomfort at having a foreigner so close to the throne. When the economy began spiraling downward, the easy narrative was, she's an Austrian agent who's more concerned about her homeland's interest than those of France. Or even more simply, she doesn't care about us at all. Her personal behavior also led to many misunderstandings. But why is that, Kimberly?
Let's keep in mind that Marie Antoinette was only 14 when she arrived, so it's no surprise she found the rigid court etiquette at Versailles stifling. In her quest for some personal freedom, she created a more exclusive circles of friends, built private retreats like the Petit Trianon, and immersed herself in fashion, lavish entertainment, and of course, parties.
Now, if you were a common French citizen, overburdened by taxes and struggling to buy bread, you'd look at the Queen's opulent sourires and wonder if she knew or even cared about your misery. This alone fueled resentment, but the press, especially the underground or liberal press, exaggerated her every action. They depicted her as overly frivolous, immoral, and controlling the king through sexual wiles. Because Louis XVI was often portrayed as passive or indecisive, even impotent, it was rumored that she pulled the strings behind the scenes.
Exactly, and the rumors didn't just come out of nowhere. There's a long-standing trope in history. When male rulers prove unpopular or incompetent, rumors mills often blame the women close to them for manipulating them or deceiving them. The underlying misogyny is pretty blatant. Women were seen as morally weak, driven by vanity and lust, so they had to be the secret cause of a man's failing. And Marie Antoinette, as an outsider, made an even better target. She was both the evil foreigner and the temptress.
Indeed. Let's delve into Louis XVI's reputation a bit more for understanding the narrative of a manipulatable king. He was known to be very shy, scholarly, and somewhat indecisive. He had interests in locksmithing, hunting, and reading, but he didn't have the political cunning or leadership qualities that would have helped to defuse the crisis France was facing. This lack of decisiveness opened the door to a flood of rumors that Marie Antoinette was the real person in charge, pulling the king's puppet strings.
And that narrative, of course, is soaked in sexist assumptions that if a man rules poorly, a woman must be to blame. In 18th century France, as already said, there was already a cultural script for blaming the evil mistress or the conniving queens. Men in power were conveniently absolved of responsibility. If they made a catastrophic decision, it was because a cunning woman whispered in their ear. This not only fed into misogyny, but also served the political aim of male revolutionaries who wanted to delegitimize the monarchy by painting the king as emasculated and the queen as wicked.
Precisely, Kim. It's a double standard that historians are seeing repeatedly time over time again in multiple contexts. Incompetent kings also remain incompetent men, but people assign the moral failing to their wives or consorts. This hammered home the idea that women in positions of influence or political power were inherently dangerous. It also suggests that the monarchy was rotting from within. If the king wasn't truly in charge, then the women were to suspect. This narrative was used to excuse the monarchy with deep implemented sexist thoughts in the society.
But it's not only the monarchy which is misogynistic. The French Revolution, for all its calls for liberté, égalité, fraternité, wasn't exactly forward-thinking and about women's rights either. The Jacobins in particular were quite hostile to the idea of women having a political voice. Figures like Olympe de Gouges, who wrote the Declaration of Rights of Women and of the Female Citizen, were met with hostility, and in Olympe's case, execution.
Yes, the Jacobin Club effectively excluded women from political clubs and debates. One might assume that, because they championed equality, they'd be inclusive for all genders. But in practice, they saw female involvement in politics as a disruption to public order. The misogyny was pervasive. By painting Marie Antoinette as the ultimate negative archetype, the foreign, manipulative woman from Austria, they could bolster their argument that women should not be allowed near political power ever.
And that is exactly the key. The demonization of Marie Antoinette didn't just serve a revolutionary ideology or an anti-monarchy agenda, it also fit into a wider societal perspective that saw a woman as inferior, morally weaker, and by definition untrustworthy. The revolutionaries harnessed existing sexist and xenophobic attitudes, weaponizing them to justify eliminating her and by extension stifling women's broader roles in public life. And they really used everything to strengthen that picture of her.
Exactly. Now we come to a scandal that truly blew the Queen's reputation to smithereens, the affair of the diamond necklace. This incident occurred in the mid-1780s, well before the actual French Revolution, and it revolved around an extremely expensive diamond necklace originally commissioned by Louis XV for his mistress, Madame du Barry. After Louis XV's death, the necklace remained unsold.
Yes, and a disgraced noblewoman named Jeanne de la Motte Valois, along with an ambitious con artist or two, hatched a plot. They convinced Cardinal de Rohan, who was desperate to regain favor at the court, that Marie Antoinette wanted to buy the necklace secretly. They forged letters in the Queen's name, orchestrated a clandestine meeting with someone disguised as a queen, and persuaded the cardinal to purchase the necklace on her behalf.
Ultimately, Jeanne de la Motte and her accomplices absconded with the necklace's diamonds, leaving Cardinal de Rohan on the hook for payment. When the scam unraveled, the public found it irresistible to believe that the Queen herself was the mastermind behind the theft. It didn't help that she and the Cardinal already had a frosty relationship. The press had a field day, spinning tales of Marie Antoinette's supposed greed, her sexual entanglements, her cunning manipulations. And even though a court declared her not guilty of the involvement in that scam, the damage was done.
To the public, the details hardly mattered. They saw Queen rumored to hold lavish gambling parties, wearing extravagant gowns, rumored to have lovers, and now associated, even if it's not true, with a stolen necklace worth the GDP of a small country. This cemented her reputation as a reckless spendthrift and a moral hazard. Basically, the worst qualities a ruler could display when the country was starving, and the press plays a huge role.
That is correct. Let's provide a specific example of how the press distorted Marie Antoinette's image during this period. Take one of the many scandalous pamphlets often called libelles. These were cheaply printed and widely circulated, filled with lurid details about the Queen's alleged affairs and her manipulations of Louis XVI. In one pamphlet, it was claimed that she had turned the Petit Trianon into a temple of debauchery, where she hosted wild orgies and squandered Francis' fortune.
How scandalous! And of course, there was no factual basis for these extreme claims. But because the pamphlets were sensational, they sold well and shaped public perception. People read them, whispered about them in taverns, and soon they became common knowledge. If the monarchy tried to censor them, it only fueled the rebellious further. Rumors flourish best under semi-secret circulation, isn't that right?
Yeah, it is totally right. So, by the late 1780s, Marie Antoinette was portrayed by these pamphlets as a decadent Madame de Fissy who partied while the kingdom teetered on the edge of collapse. And Louis XVI, he was the hapless cuckold, too weak or incompetent to stop her, obviously under her diabolical influence. This framing absolved him of direct blame in the public imagination. Ironically, it pinned it all on her, and by extension, pinned the monarchy's failures on feminine weakness and foreign infiltration by Austria. But let's move to the French Revolution.
When the revolution erupted in 1789, kick-started by the storming of the Bastille, the monarchy tried to adjust to the new power dynamics, but censorship collapsed, opening the floodgates to even wilder stories about Marie Antoinette. She was now depicted in cartoons and pamphlets as the she-devil, a serpent, or sometimes a literal beast with horns responsible for all of France's woes. The flight to Varennes in 1791, where the royal family tried to escape, only made things much worse. The retreat to Varennes in 1791, where the royal family tried to escape, only made things much worse.
Absolutely. By attempting to flee, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette confirmed many suspicions that they planned to rally foreign troops from Austria or other European powers against the revolutionaries. This reinforced the xenophobic view that, as an Austrian, she was actively plotting to destroy France from the very within. Thomas Jefferson, then in France, famously said something along the lines of, "If there had been no queen, there would have been no revolution." Well, this is speculation. It just captures how powerfully Marie Antoinette was blamed for the chaos during the French Revolution.
100%, and let's not forget the sexist undercurrents. Depicting the queen as a monstrous force from abroad reinforced the Jacobins' narrative that women were too unstable or immoral for public life. That shows very well, of course, the revolutionaries themselves faced contradictions. On one hand, they championed human rights, but not for women. They sought to abolish privilege, yet frequently used xenophobic slurs. It didn't look very good for Marie Antoinette.
It didn't look good for her indeed. Eventually, she was captured and in 1793 put on trial. The charges ranged from conspiring with foreign powers to the horrifying accusation of incest with her young son. Many historians argue that the trial was never about truth. It was a political show to humiliate her and legitimize the revolutionaries' power. She was found guilty, pardoned through the streets in a plain dress, and executed by guillotine on October 16, 1793.
To revolutionary radicals, her death symbolized the end of an era, but is also laid bare by the extreme misogyny and xenophobia that had been fueling the anti-queen propaganda. The press, which had built up the image of Marie Antoinette as a foreign, manipulative, and morally bankrupt woman, celebrated her execution with great joy.
And yet, the line that most people remember to this day, "Let them eat cake," isn't something she ever likely said. It endures as a symbol of aristocratic arrogance, a stand-in for the monarchy's detachment from the suffering of the ordinary people. It's often used as a shorthand for ruling class, ignorant of the basic needs of the people they are about to rule.
And that's the great irony. The phrase is so perfect as a portrait of clueless success that it became mythologized. Real or not, it underscores how the monarchy was perceived, and that perception was a powerful force in revolutionary France. But as we've seen, simplifying Marie Antoinette's role to that of a single callous sentence ignores the complex mix of misogyny, xenophobia, political maneuvering, and genuine systematic crisis that brought France to revolution.
So, what can we take away from this? For starters, the French Revolution was an event of monumental complexity. Yes, the monarchy's extravagant spending, along with a crumbling tax system and widespread hunger, contributed to the public's fury. But it wasn't just the Queen's supposed quip that ignited the revolt. Rather, it was decades, if not centuries, of tension, mismanagement, and injustice that finally led to the murderous turmoil of the French Revolution.
Furthermore, the demonization of Marie Antoinette shows how narratives about powerful women can become laced with sexism and xenophobia. The Jacobins, who wanted to overthrow tyranny, paradoxically upheld patriarchal norms by excluding women from the political sphere. And in that environment, it was all too convenient to cast a foreign queen as a villain.
Let's take the affair of the diamond necklace into perception. It is a perfect illustration of how a scandal, even when based on forgeries and conspiracies, can shape public opinion. With the gossip-hungry pamphlets fueling the flames, the line between fact and fiction was blurred. The Queen's real life got lost in the swirl of sensational rumor.
And let's not forget the enduring symbolism of the term, let them eat cake. Even though historians have largely debunked it as something Marie Antoinette never said, it remains a pop cultural staple. Books, films, and even serious academic discussions still cite it as a term for elite obliviousness. It's a reminder that myths, even when not true and connected with problematic thoughts, can stay so relevant by capturing something essential about the zeitgeist, namely the frustration people feel when their rulers seem indifferent to their plight.
Exactly, and it's a cautionary tale for all times, including our own. When inequality grows and people feel unheard, rumours and scapegoating can go on a rampage. Leaders who appear detached or dismissive of ordinary struggles risk being saddled with a cake quote of their own, symbolic or otherwise.
And all we have to do is look at our current crisis-ridden era today. The sentence has regained relevance and still holds powerful symbolic value. However, this episode demonstrates that even emancipatory movements must be careful not to reproduce xenophobia or sexist images, so as to remain inclusive rather than exclusive, and to continue fighting for the rights, and that is the rights of everyone.
So, in conclusion, Marie Antoinette may not have said, let them eat cake, but that myth encapsulated a profound political and social crisis that was about so much more than just one singular person. It was about the collapse of a system, the hunger in the people's bellies, and the resentments fueling a drive for radical change.
Very well said, Patrick. I think we'll leave it at that. Well, if you've enjoyed our deep dive, make sure to subscribe and share this episode. Next time, we'll explore another controversial chapter of history, so stay tuned.